Welcome back to LexTalk, everybody.
Glad to be back.
So glad to have you with us for episode 2.
Episode 2, season 2.
Season 2, you got it.
Yeah.
Today,
This is a good one.
we are tackling a topic that is super relevant to all of you educators and parents out there, especially here in Thailand.
Especially in Thailand.
How to really get those ESL students fired up about learning English.
Yes.
You've sent us some really interesting sources.
Yeah.
A mini handbook on the psychology of ESL learning.
Mm-hmm.
And a piece specifically about student motivation.
Right.
We're going to break those down and give you this need-to-know info to apply in your classrooms or even at home.
Yeah, practical stuff. Actionable.
Exactly.
That you can take away and actually use.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's start with the basics.
Okay.
What exactly is motivation, and why is it such a big deal when it comes to learning a new language?
Well, motivation is that inner drive that pushes us to do anything, really.
Right.
But when it comes to language learning, it's absolutely crucial. It's the difference between a student who's just going through the motions and one who is actively engaged,
Right.
eager to learn,
Yeah.
and actually using the language outside of class.
That's the key, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what we want.
Because you can, do really well in class, ace all the tests.
You got it.
But if you walk outside and you don't want to use the language, then
And it just stays in the classroom.
what's the point?
Right? Exactly.
I could definitely see that. I mean, we've all had those students who just seem to soak up everything,
Yeah.
and then others who struggle to even participate.
Yeah, you're right. And a lot of it comes down to whether their motivation is intrinsic or extrinsic.
Okay.
Intrinsic motivation comes from within. The student is genuinely curious about the language, enjoys the learning process, and wants to improve for their own personal satisfaction. Extrinsic motivation, on the other hand, is driven by external factors.
Okay, so like grades.
Yeah, grades, rewards,
Rewards.
parental pressure,
Parental pressure.
that kind of thing.
So it's like the difference between wanting to learn something because you find it fascinating
Yeah,
versus feeling like you have to learn it
you have to.
to avoid punishment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And while both types of motivation can play a role, tapping into that intrinsic motivation is where we see the most long-term success.
Okay.
Students who are intrinsically motivated tend to be more persistent, more resilient when they face challenges,
Right.
and ultimately they get more out of the learning experience.
For sure. That makes a lot of sense. And thinking about our specific context here in Thailand, motivating ESL students comes with its own unique set of hurdles.
Yeah, it does.
Doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Our sources mention things like the language barrier itself,
Of course.
cultural differences, fear of making mistakes, and limited exposure to English outside the classroom.
It's tough.
Yeah. It's just,
These are all very real challenges that can make it tough for students to stay motivated.
absolutely.
For example, imagine a student who's never really used English outside of a textbook. It can be intimidating to suddenly try and communicate in a real-world setting where they might not understand everything perfectly.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Like even for us
Yeah.
as native speakers,
Totally.
if you go to a country where they don't speak your native language,
Mm-hmm.
it can be terrifying to even try and order food sometimes.
Right. You just feel like you stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, you feel so self-conscious.
You feel a lot.
And Thai people especially are very non-confrontational,
Yeah.
so they don't want to cause any,
They're very polite. Yeah.
they don't want to embarrass you
Right.
by correcting you.
Yeah.
So you can go for a really long time thinking you're saying things correctly,
And you're not.
and then you're not.
Yeah.
And then when you find out, you're like, oh my gosh, I've been saying it like this the whole time.
Totally.
Yeah, it's tough.
It is.
It's like
I've
being
been-
thrown into the deep end of the pool when you've only ever practiced in the shallows.
Exactly. And that feeling of being overwhelmed or inadequate can really dampen a student's enthusiasm.
For sure.
But the good news is that these challenges are not insurmountable.
All right, good.
There are a lot of things educators and parents can do to create a more supportive and motivating learning environment.
Well, that's what we're here for.
That's what we're going to talk about.
Let's dive into some of those practical strategies from our sources, starting with the classroom environment.
Okay.
One of the simplest yet most effective things teachers can do is to create a positive and supportive atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Our mini handbook really emphasizes the importance of praise and encouragement.
Yeah.
But isn't that kind of stating the obvious?
It might seem obvious, but you'd be surprised how often that simple act of acknowledging a student's effort can make a world of difference.
Right.
Especially in a culture like Thailand,
Yeah.
where students might be hesitant to speak up for fear of making a mistake.
Yeah.
A little encouragement can go a long way.
Yeah, that's so true. So it's not just about praising the right answer.
Right.
It's about acknowledging the effort behind any attempt to communicate in English.
Exactly. It's about creating a safe space where students feel comfortable taking risks, experimenting with the language, and learning from their mistakes without feeling judged or embarrassed.
So true, because every time you open your mouth
Mm-hmm.
and try to say something,
Yeah.
you're just met with, criticism or people sort of laughing at you.
You're going to shut down? Right.
Yeah, you're going to completely shut down. So it's here where people are already so shy
Yeah,
about making mistakes in public.
totally.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking back to my own experience as a language learner, and I could definitely remember those times when I felt intimidated to speak up in class.
Scary.
It is. But when a teacher created a more relaxed and supportive atmosphere, I was much more willing to participate and take those risks.
It makes a big difference. And that's where that shift from extrinsic to intrinsic motivation can really happen. When students feel safe and supported, they're more likely to engage with the material out of genuine interest and curiosity, rather than just trying to please the teacher or get a good grade.
Yeah, so it's about fostering a love of the language itself.
That's what we're going for, yeah.
Yeah, that's what we want.
Yeah.
So it's about creating that sense of intrinsic motivation
Right.
by fostering a positive and encouraging learning environment.
Precisely. And a key part of that is helping students see challenges as opportunities for growth rather than roadblocks to success. That's where the concept of a growth mindset comes in.
Okay. I've heard about growth mindset,
Yeah.
but can you remind us what that is and how it relates to language learning?
So a growth mindset is the belief that our abilities are not fixed, but rather they can be developed through effort and perseverance.
Right.
In the context of ESL, it's about encouraging students to see mistakes as a natural part of the learning process,
Yeah.
not as failures.
Yeah.
It's about helping them understand that the more they practice, the more they'll improve, even if they stumble along the way.
So it's kind of the opposite of you're either good at languages or you're not.
Exactly.
Some people are just naturally gifted.
Right.
It's saying, no, you can get better at this.
You can work at it
It's a
still if you keep trying.
So it's about reframing the way they view challenges and helping them develop that resilience to keep going, even when things get tough.
Exactly. And a practical way to cultivate that growth mindset is through goal setting.
Okay, now we're not talking about those vague, overwhelming goals like become fluent in English, right?
Right. We're talking about SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Instead of aiming for some distant and abstract concept of fluency, help students break down their learning journey into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Yep.
For example, instead of saying, I want to be fluent, a student might set a goal of, I want to be able to hold a basic conversation about my hobbies in English by the end of the semester.
Okay.
Yeah, something concrete.
So it's something that you can actually measure and track.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So how would a teacher go about, helping a student set these SMART goals?
It's about working with the student, talking to them, finding out what they're interested in,
Right.
what they want to get out of learning English.
What they need to use it for.
Exactly. And then working backwards from there.
That's much more concrete and achievable.
Yeah.
And I imagine it's much more motivating to see yourself making progress towards those smaller goals rather than feeling overwhelmed by the enormity of the overall task.
Exactly. It's about creating those small wins along the way that reinforce a student's sense of accomplishment and keep them moving forward.
Right.
And don't forget the importance of celebrating those wins,
Right.
no matter how small they might seem.
Like even if they can just, order their food
Yeah.
at a restaurant.
Celebrate that.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about setting the goals. It's about acknowledging and celebrating the progress made towards those goals. Absolutely. A simple, well done, or
Yeah.
you're making great progress can be incredibly motivating, especially for those students who might be struggling with self-doubt.
Yeah. Just that little bit of encouragement can make a world of difference.
It can.
This reminds me of something we discussed earlier about those 3 psychological needs: autonomy,
Yeah.
competence, and relatedness. Can you remind us how those tie into creating a motivating learning environment?
Of course. Autonomy is all about giving students a sense of ownership over their learning. It's about allowing them to make choices, have a voice in the classroom, and feel like they're actively participating in the learning process.
So instead of just being passive recipients of information, they're actively shaping their own learning
Right.
experience.
That is there.
And competence is all about helping students feel capable and successful.
That's it.
This ties back to setting achievable goals and celebrating those small wins.
Yeah.
When students experience success, they're more likely to believe in their abilities and feel motivated to continue learning. And finally, relatedness is about fostering that sense of connection and belonging. Right.
Precisely. It's about creating a classroom community where students feel supported, understood, and connected to both their peers and the teacher. This can be achieved through collaborative activities, group projects, and simply creating opportunities for students to interact and learn from each other.
That's so important,
Yeah.
especially I think here in Thailand,
Yeah.
where, people are very used to being in groups, very community oriented.
Absolutely.
So to bring that into the classroom, I think would be very helpful.
Yeah, it makes sense culturally.
Yeah, this is making me think about how important it is for teachers to build rapport with their students. I mean, if there's no sense of trust or connection,
Yeah,
it's going to be much harder to motivate them.
absolutely. Building those positive relationships is crucial. When students feel like their teacher genuinely cares about them and their learning, they're much more likely to be engaged and motivated.
So it goes beyond just being nice. It's
Yeah.
about being empathetic,
Yes.
understanding the challenges they face, and being there to support them through those challenges.
Exactly. It's about creating that safe and supportive learning environment we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and I think also sometimes, as a teacher, it's easy to forget that
Yeah.
these students are,
They're people?
they're people. They
Yeah.
have lives.
Yeah, stuff going on.
They have families. They have things happening outside of school
Right.
that can affect their mood,
Yeah.
their motivation, their
Ah,
ability
yeah.
to concentrate.
Yeah.
So it's about taking all of that into consideration.
Being human.
Being human. Yeah.
Recognizing their humanity.
Yeah. So
Okay.
creating a motivating ESL classroom really boils down to understanding these psychological needs, fostering a positive and encouraging atmosphere, and using strategies that tap into a student's natural curiosity and desire to learn.
Precisely. It's about creating a space where students feel empowered, supported, and inspired to embrace the challenge of learning English.
I think that's a great place to pause for now.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive,
A lot of ground.
but we've still got plenty more to explore.
We do.
Before we move on, let's take a quick moment to remind our listeners to follow LexTalk on all our platforms.
Yes.
You can find us on our website, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, SoundCloud, and Spotify. Just search for @LexTalk Podcast.
Come hang out with us. We'd love to have you join our community of language enthusiasts.
Yes, we would. We'll be back in just a moment to continue our exploration of this fascinating topic.
Okay, sounds good.
Stay tuned.
We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to LexTalk.
All right, so we've talked about the importance of a positive classroom environment,
Yeah.
setting smart goals, and meeting those key psychological needs.
Those are so important.
But we know those are kind of general.
Yeah, they are.
Those are things that can be applied to a lot of
things.
areas of life. What are some other strategies that can really make a difference, especially here in Thailand?
Okay, so one thing that's often overlooked is the importance of showing students how English can directly benefit them in their lives, even if they don't have many opportunities to use it outside the classroom right now.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Because, why bother putting in the effort
Right.
if you don't see how it's relevant to your life?
Exactly. It's about making those connections between the classroom and the real world, even if that real world feels a bit far off for some students. For example, instead of just teaching vocabulary about jobs, you could have students research companies they admire that use English, or have them explore study abroad opportunities.
I like that it's about planting those seeds of possibility
Yeah,
and showing them that English can open doors to new experiences and opportunities in the future.
exactly. And it can be as simple as incorporating authentic materials into your lessons.
Okay.
Things like English language songs, movie clips, or even news articles about topics they're interested in.
Okay, so like bringing in things from pop culture.
Yeah, pop culture,
Things that they're already into.
right, things that are interesting to them.
Instead of just, textbook.
Try textbook stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of course books try to do that now,
Did you?
but sometimes it can be a little bit,
A little forced.
a little bit forced, a little bit
Yeah.
contrived,
It's not quite there.
not quite natural.
Yeah.
So that's where you as a teacher can really,
Bring your own.
bring your own
thought.
personality and your own knowledge of your students
Exactly.
into it.
Yeah.
That reminds me of something our source mentioned about reward systems.
Okay.
I know some people are wary of relying too heavily on rewards because it can feel like you're just bribing students to learn. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, it's a valid concern. Rewards can be a slippery slope if they become the sole driver of motivation.
Right.
The goal is to use them strategically, not as the main focus, but as a way to acknowledge effort and progress.
Okay.
Think of it like a bonus, not the main salary.
Okay, so it's about striking that balance between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation.
Exactly. You can use rewards to boost enthusiasm, but you don't want students to become dependent on them.
Right, so what are some examples of rewards that you've found effective without overshadowing that intrinsic motivation?
It really depends on the students and the context. Sometimes simple things like verbal praise or letting a student choose an activity can be very motivating. Other times, a small token or certificate of achievement can be meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it really just depends.
I imagine it's also important to consider the cultural context here in Thailand.
Absolutely. What's considered an appropriate reward in one culture might not be in another.
Right.
It's important to be sensitive to those cultural nuances.
For sure. Speaking of cultural nuances, let's talk about technology.
Okay.
It plays such a huge role in education these days.
Oh, yeah.
And our sources highlighted how it can be a powerful tool for motivating ESL learners.
It really can. Technology can really level the playing field, especially in a context like Thailand, where access to native English speakers might be limited.
Right.
Language learning apps and websites can provide personalized practice, instant feedback, and exposure to a variety of accents and dialects.
It's like having a virtual English tutor at your fingertips.
Mhm.
One of our sources specifically mentioned using apps like Duolingo or Babbel.
Yeah, those are good ones.
Have you found those to be effective?
I have. They're great for supplemental practice and can be very motivating, especially for students who enjoy the gamified aspects of learning.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of students these days are gamers.
Yeah.
So they like that kind of
Yeah, they like that reward
the
system.
points and the levels and stuff like that.
And it's not just about apps.
Right.
We can also use technology to bring more interactive and engaging activities into the classroom.
Absolutely. Things like online quizzes, virtual field trips, or even creating videos or podcasts in English can be really motivating for students.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Especially the podcasting. I think that's something that
It's really popular these days.
it's really popular and
It's accessible.
it's accessible and it gives them a chance to use their creativity
Yeah,
and share their voices in a different way.
totally. And it taps into that need for autonomy we talked about earlier.
Right.
When students have some control over what they create and how they learn, they're more likely to be invested in the process.
Okay, so we've talked about creating a positive environment,
Yeah.
setting goals, making English relevant,
Right.
using rewards strategically,
Mm-hmm.
and leveraging technology.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else we should be keeping in mind when it comes to motivating ESL students?
One thing that's often overlooked but absolutely essential is addressing the emotional well-being of our students. Learning a new language can be a very emotional experience, and those emotions can have a big impact on their motivation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, imagine the frustration of not being able to express yourself clearly, or the fear of making mistakes in front of your classmates.
Exactly, and sometimes those negative emotions can spiral and really dampen a student's enthusiasm.
Yeah.
That's why it's crucial for teachers to create a safe space where students feel comfortable sharing their feelings about learning.
Yeah, and so it's not about, pretending that everything's always easy and fun.
Right.
It's about acknowledging that learning a language isn't always easy.
It's hard work.
And it's okay to feel frustrated
Yeah.
or discouraged at times.
Absolutely. It's about normalizing those feelings and
Yeah.
helping students develop strategies for coping with them. Sometimes just talking about their challenges can be a huge relief.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think as teachers,
Yeah.
regardless if you've learned another language yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you can relate to those struggles.
Absolutely.
And I imagine it's also important for teachers to model that vulnerability and share their own experiences with learning English or other languages.
That's a great point. When students see that even their teacher has faced challenges and made mistakes, it makes the whole process feel more relatable and human.
Yeah.
It also helps build trust and rapport.
And speaking of building rapport, let's not forget the power of humor. I'm a big believer in bringing a little laughter into the classroom.
Me too. Humor can be such a valuable tool for creating a more relaxed and enjoyable learning environment.
Yeah.
And it can also be a great way to build connections and reduce stress.
I remember having a teacher who used to tell jokes in English. And even though I didn't always understand them perfectly, the act of laughing together created a sense of camaraderie in the classroom.
I love that. Yeah, it's those shared moments of joy and connection that can really make a difference in a student's learning experience.
I completely agree. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground in this second part of our deep dive.
Yeah, we have.
Before we move on to the final part, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, the importance of encouraging autonomy and collaboration in the ESL classroom.
Those are so important. These are key elements of what we call a student-centered approach to learning. It's about shifting the focus from the teacher as the sole source of knowledge to empowering students to take ownership of their learning and contribute to the learning community.
Right, so instead of the teacher being the sage on the stage,
Yeah.
they become more of a guide on the side.
Exactly. It's about creating opportunities for students to make choices, collaborate with their peers, and actively participate in the learning process.
Mm-hmm. And our source mentioned several strategies for fostering this student-centered approach,
Yeah.
like giving students choices in how they complete assignments,
Yeah.
encouraging peer teaching and feedback, and creating opportunities for project-based learning.
These are all fantastic strategies that can really boost student motivation and engagement. For example, imagine giving students the choice of writing an essay, creating a presentation, or recording a podcast to demonstrate their understanding of a topic.
Yeah, that's much more engaging than just assigning a standard essay to everyone.
Exactly. And it allows students to tap into their individual strengths and learning styles.
And when it comes to collaboration, I imagine activities like group projects or peer review sessions can be really valuable.
They can. Not only do they provide opportunities for students to practice their English skills in a more authentic setting, but they also help them develop those important interpersonal skills that are so crucial in today's world.
Right, so it's not just about, the language itself.
Right.
It's about those other skills
Communication.
that will help them be successful.
Teamwork. Problem solving.
Yeah, absolutely.
All that good stuff.
It's about preparing them not just for academic success, but for success in life.
Exactly.
I love that. And this brings us back to those 3 psychological needs we keep talking about:
Yeah.
autonomy, competence, and relatedness.
It all comes back to that.
It all ties into.
Precisely by providing opportunities for choice collaboration and community building, we're essentially meeting those fundamental needs, which in turn fuels their intrinsic motivation and leads to deeper engagement with the learning process.
So it's like a positive feedback loop.
That's it.
The more we do these things, the more motivated the students become.
Exactly. And the more they learn,
The more they learn, and then the more they want to do it.
it's a beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing. All right. I think we're ready to move on to the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, sounds good.
We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still more to explore.
There is. We've got some good stuff coming up.
I'm excited to bring it all together and leave our listeners with some final thoughts and takeaways.
Me too. It's been a really interesting discussion so far.
We'll be back in just a moment to wrap up our exploration of motivating ESL students right here on LexTalk. Stay tuned.
All right, see you in a bit.
Welcome back to LexTalk, everyone. This is the final part of our deep dive into motivating ESL students. We've talked about creating a positive classroom environment, setting SMART goals, and leveraging technology.
Yeah. And making it relevant.
Right, making it relevant.
Addressing those emotional needs.
Yes, addressing those emotional needs and
Encouraging autonomy.
encouraging autonomy and collaboration.
It's a lot.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
But, it's all important.
Yeah.
But before we wrap things up, I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier, the importance of teachers reflecting on their own practice. Why is that so crucial, especially when it comes to motivation?
Well, reflecting on our teaching practices helps us stay adaptable and responsive to the ever-changing needs of our students. Motivation isn't a static thing. What works for one student might not work for another, and what works one day might not work the next.
So it's about constantly observing, evaluating, and adjusting our approach based on what we're seeing in the classroom.
Exactly. It's about being willing to experiment with different strategies, seek feedback from our students, and be open to new ideas.
And, we as teachers,
Yeah.
we like to think we know everything.
Sometimes we do, but
As soon as we don't.
the students are really the experts in their own
They are.
learning.
Absolutely.
So it's about listening to them.
Asking them what they need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our mini handbook actually suggests keeping a teaching journal
Oh, that's a great idea.
to track what's working and what's not.
It can be really helpful to have a record of your observations and reflections. It allows you to see patterns, identify areas for growth, and make more informed decisions about your teaching.
Right. So it's like when you're trying to, lose weight
Track your
or
calories or
track your calories or,
steps or whatever.
build a new habit.
Right.
You're tracking it
Keep track of it, yeah.
so you can see the progress.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's about approaching teaching with a growth mindset, just like we encourage our students to approach learning. Precisely. The best teachers are those who are lifelong learners themselves, always seeking to improve their craft.
Yeah, and I think that's really inspiring for students as well,
Yeah.
to see that their teacher's still learning and growing.
Absolutely. Makes you more relatable,
Yeah.
more human,
It makes you more human,
less like a robot.
less like a robot.
Yeah.
Now, before we say goodbye, I want to bring it back to our listeners and the question I posed earlier. How can we apply these insights about motivation to our own lives beyond the classroom?
That's such an important question. The principles of motivation are universal. They apply whether we're learning a language, starting a business, or simply trying to develop a healthier habit.
So what are some key takeaways that we can all benefit from regardless of our specific goals?
First and foremost, understand your why. What is it that truly motivates you? What are your goals and aspirations? When you have a clear sense of purpose, it's much easier to stay motivated even when faced with challenges.
It's about connecting our actions to our values and finding that deeper meaning behind what we're doing.
Exactly. Once you have that clarity, break down your goals into smaller, more manageable steps. Remember those SMART goals we talked about? That applies to personal goals as well.
Right. So instead of saying, I want to learn, a new language,
Yeah.
by the end of the year,
Be more specific.
break it down
Right.
into what do I need to do each day,
Exactly.
each week, each month
Make it concrete.
to achieve that goal.
Right.
It's about creating that roadmap to success and giving yourself those small wins along the way to celebrate.
And don't forget to create a supportive environment for yourself. Surround yourself with people who encourage and inspire you, and don't be afraid to seek help when you need it.
That's so important.
As
We all need a cheerleader in our corner.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's about building that network of support and remembering that we don't have to do it all alone.
And finally, be kind to yourself. Learning and growth take time and effort. There will be setbacks along the way, but it's important to embrace those challenges as opportunities for learning and keep moving forward.
It's about having that growth mindset, not just for our students, but for ourselves as well. Well said. This has been an incredibly enriching discussion. We've explored the complexities of motivation, uncovered practical strategies for the classroom, and discovered how these principles can be applied to our own lives.
I agree. It's been a pleasure diving deep into this topic with you and our wonderful listeners.
Before we sign off, let's remind everyone to follow LexTalk on all our platforms, our website, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, SoundCloud, and Spotify. You can find us at LexTalk Podcast. We share lots of great content about English linguistics and language learning in general.
Yeah, and we'd love to hear from you. Let us know what topics you'd like us to explore in future episodes.
And remember our motto, let's talk.
Let's learn.
Let's talk.